Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with the last Epoch build guide video. Finally, I'm able to show you gameplay footage, which I started off with the cycle 1.1 in last Epoch Harbingers. Actually, very excited to show you guys this one. Essentially, I made a video talking about my league starter or cycle starter. Couldn't show you gameplay footage because it was bugged in 1.0. It's been fixed and I did the testing in closed test realm. I'm now able to show you the gameplay footage and I'll talk you through the build guide. Do keep in mind that if you're watching this video long after it's been posted, it's very likely that it's been updated, and therefore there's a link in the descriptions below to the written build guide, which will be kept up to date as long as the build is functional. Not really sure what to call it, so we named it the Drain Life, essentially. Drain Life LICH. In here, you have access to a planner, you have access to the loot filter, and everything you could ever want to make this build functional. I'm going to show you these things in-game, but the link to that build guide is linked in the descriptions below. This build is very special, so let me get the questions, the most common questions out of the way first, such as, oh, GHAZZY, can you league start this or cycle start with it? No, you cannot. Oh, but GHAZZY, the Stygian coal is only level 36. No, you cannot start with it. So here's how the build works. Stygian coal looks like this. Essentially what it does is that it makes it so that as long as you're casting Drain Life, it will start shooting necrotic beams instead. These are called Stygian beams. To show you the Stygian beams, we do this, and we can see that it's a hit-based necrotic and spell tagged. That means this is not scaling from your intelligence on the actual ability. Very important detail, which is very sad. I was hoping they actually would do that. Instead, what it does is that the Stygian coal will apply Ignite and Damned on hits whilst channeling, which we don't really care because we're not actually going to be channeling. We're going to get ward per second while channeling. Again, not something we're going to be using. Instead, Drain Life will cast the Stygian beams. Each point of intelligence is obviously going to give us some stats such as increased damage with intelligence-based abilities, such as the Wandering Spirit, also ward retention, and it's going to give us Stygian beam frequency per intelligence. Originally, I went with a very heavy focus on intelligence on this build, and after playtesting it even further in the initial stages, because in the higher endgame, you can do that and it's perfectly fine. I've been playtesting this build up to 672 corruption, which it dealt with pretty fine with proper gearing. However, before getting to proper gearing, it was better to scale the damage over the intelligence. You still want it, but don't focus on it. Other part of this is that you deal more Stygian beam damage per 10 current mana. This means you want to have a large mana pool, and therefore you want to have as much mana regen as possible. So, the way the build works is by casting Drain Life, and we're going to make sure we spec into Dark Shackles, which makes this a cast. Since it's now a cast, we are no longer channeling. This means that any sort of modifiers that applies to channeling effect doesn't work. We will increase the duration of this, making this last 8 seconds. We are going to combine this with Eternal Servitude, which makes it so that when Wandering Spirits is active, does not expire as long as the Drain Life is actually active. And this says when you start channeling Drain Life, which is really weird because we're not channeling, but this works. So the playstyle is cast Wandering Spirits, cast the Drain Life, and listen to the shotgun. I've already lowered the volume of this. Essentially what's going to happen is as long as you're casting it, you see a Mista window there, my Wandering Spirits will go away. Takes 8 seconds for this to go away, and you want to have as much mana as possible, which means that it is important that you get full mana before casting this again, which means you do not want to level with this until you have the Stygian coal and enough mana regen, so that you can cast the Drain Life essentially every 6, maybe 7 seconds, worst case scenario, so you don't accidentally lose your Wandering Spirits. So if I cast it every time I hit full mana, you'll see here very quickly that I will not lose my Wandering Spirits. Now, if you manage to screw up and miss this, your Wandering Spirit will obviously come off cooldown, and you can sustain this essentially forever. That's how the build deals damage, the Wandering Spirits and your Stygian beams. The other approach to this is that we're going to have a ridiculous amount of leeching. This allows us to stay in Reaper form for a very, very, very long time. I'm not going to go through all the details of every single node, but essentially the Reaper form tree, we're going to go to Reaper's Ascendance, which gives us more spell damage per stack the longer we've stayed in the form, and 2 points into Reaper Supremacy to increase the frequency of this. This means that the longer we stay in the form, the more damage we're going to do. And since we are able to sustain it essentially forever, as long as we're hitting something, you have to get literally one shot for you to lose this. Remaining points will go into crit scaling and further down for flat necrotic damage, and then the rest of the points into crit multi. We're going to use a Bone Curse because I am a lazy SOB and make sure that we get marked for death and make it unlimited duration. This allows us to put one curse on a boss target and never need to cast this again. This means the build will essentially on a boss fight only cast once every 6 seconds, which is very, very uncomfortable. Other than that, we're doing a kill threshold, very generic. Death Seal is a very special approach. Now, I've respected and tested a few things out with this, but the core approach of the Death Seal is to go to Deadlock, which means that health is reduced down to low life, 33% when you activate it. And this means that we're going to get increased damage per 3% missing HP, per 3% missing HP. Because of this, it also scales with the Lich node here, Dance with Death, to triple the value of this damage increase node. So essentially, this is our big damage increase button, but you're going to be on low life, which means you have a higher risk of getting shot out of Reperform. We're going to put in the Grim Scale, which actually makes it so that when you have increased mana regen whilst you're sealed, to help with the mana regeneration. And if you drop below 10% life, you will automatically drop the Death Seal so that your Leech will skyrocket you up to full HP. I then took the duration, of course, and made sure that the current health drain doesn't work, and then we get hasten release as well as extra heals when it released to get that HP back up in case we dropped down below 10%. 3 points left over. There's nothing really scaling this build at all, so we just threw them in here. You could remove this so that the build does some actual death waves and then spec into necrosis. It's a little bit whatever you feel like approach to it. Wandering Spirit is very simple. We're going to be getting reveal rate since we're going to have it active 24/7. We just wanted to reveal as much as possible. We're going to bomb rush up to get the mana gain, of course, first, to make sure we help with the mana sustain. And the rest of the points goes into the necrotic resistance shred, and the remaining points into damned. That's how the build and the skills work for this build. I'm going to play some maps for this. I wanted to show you my gear before doing so to make you understand that this character is quite significantly under-geared. I do have some generic life idols. This is a bad one, for example, fair on hit. You want to have double life on every single slot, such as, this one, or these 4 stout idols with double HP. When it comes to the gear itself, we'll start with the uniques. I want to mention that, yes, indeed, I do have an LP4 Stygian Coal. However, LP2 is all you need because the remaining suffixes can only be resistances that benefits this build. Can help with a little bit of gearing if you want to try to min-max this. I started that process, but as you can see in my gold and the fact that I'm telling you that my gear is kind of subpar, I obviously failed every craft ever since. But this is how the Stygian Coal will work. You'll focus on critical strike or crit multi. With the latest changes we've done to the build, I would maybe focus on crit multi instead of the spell crit. The other unique is an Orion's Eye. This is a ridiculously rare amulet. This is by no means mandatory or necessary for the build to function. Another option for this would actually be something like an Omni. Omni drops from 200 plus corrupted Shade of Oribus. This gives you tons of resistances. The comfortable part with Orions is that you take less fire damage, and all void damage is taken as fire, so you don't need void res. But all these works fine, and if you want to have it even easier on you, you can literally just use an Exalted Amulet, focus on the flat mana. You can go for spell crit, crit multi, and any resistances or even health if you want to go from there. But the mana is very important. So that's how the uniques works in this build. Rare items in general, we're going to start with the important part. We're going to use a Rune Dagger because of the base crits that it provides, which is very important. It also gives you some spell damage. You want to focus on the mana regen prefix modifier, then crit multi. Suffixes should be necrotic penetration, and then there's armor shred, which, as you can see, I do not have. I do actually have a sealed, what is that, tier 1 necrotic damage. Other than that, we're going to be using 2 very, very important parts when it comes to the defensive layers of this build. So I'm going to talk about the defense of the character first, then we'll talk about the offense. So the Orion's Eye, obviously great to use in Omni or Exalted, but you really want to make sure that we have 60% endurance. That means that when you go below to your endurance threshold in HP, you're then going to have 60% damage mitigation, which will be your entire life pool when you click your Death Seal. Very important for this build, which is why we need the Revenant body armor base. Now, you can play without this when you start playing monos, but for endgame, this is crucial. You want to have level of Reperform, preferably with Exalted, so that you can reach more crit multi, which I don't have. And then mana is the secondary focus, and then you want to have double life modifiers. The way we get the endurance is actually through blessing. I'll talk about that later. So the helmet is the other defensive piece that's super important. This is a Revenant helmet. So this allows us to get, again, endurance and reduce bonus taken from critical strikes. The focus here should be mana, then go intelligence and double HP. The belt should always be a spider silk to cover your resistances. As you can see, I'm kind of good on res, except for necrotic, but it's only 3%. The focus should be necrotic. Couldn't buy one. I ended up with mana regen, which is a secondary mod. Double HP modifiers percented hybrid here, and that's about it. The last defensive piece that we want to use for this is a pair of Citadel boots for endgame because of the reduced bonus taken for critical strikes. You're not going to have 100%, you'll be fine. The focus here is two different things. You can go for intelligence if you want to have damage output, or rather DPS. I like the movement speed for better clear speed generally. And then you want to have a modifier with reduced bonus damage taken from crits and a hybrid HP. The other gear modifiers is for offensive scaling. We're going to start with the Relic. You want to have a high focus on crit multi on a Decaying Homunculus. And then the next one will be spell crit. And the suffixes should be health and whatever resistances you might need. As you can see, I'm severely overcapped now. This is thanks to the Stygian Coal. Haven't been able to tweak and min-max the build. The gloves can either be Arcane Bracers or the Solarum, which gives you crit strike chance. You have a couple of options here. The focus should be to always have a critical strike chance gear modifier here. I would prefer to have an Exalted Mana roll in here. And then you could choose between intelligence and or crit. So you have 3 different prefixes. My personal preference is to run mana and crits, since the damage of Stygian Beam does not scale with crit. Then the suffixes is hybrid HP and shred armor on hits. And as you can see, these gloves, they're not really that good, but this is what we have, right? Don't laugh at me. Ring-wise, you have a couple of different bases. If you need help with resistances, you can use those bases. Otherwise, flat mana or critical strike chance is really, really good. Thanks to the Runic Dagger, I very often would prefer a Sapphire Ring for the mana. And the focus should be necrotic damage, not intelligence. And then the suffixes should be 1 health modifier and then either a resistances. And if you don't need resistance at this point, what you could do is actually add endurance threshold, and that will help you with EHP when you're not in Death Seal. My other ring actually does have necrotic damage, and mana regen, a rest, and an HP roll. And that's it for the gear. When it comes to the blessings, obviously, we don't care about the drop ones. The gear affecting ones is a flat HP, which comes from the Black Sun. We're going to go for flat mana from Ending the Storm. And then, obviously, an all resistance blessing from the Reign of Dragons. And then the next one is the physical resistance modifier from the Age of Winter. And lastly, the endurance from Spirits of Fire. Now, if you hover over your HP bar, you'll see the endurance says 60%. I have exactly 60%, which is why you need to make sure that you check your endurance that you get from your helmet, plus the 20% base of your character, and then how much you get for your blessings to get to that 60%. That makes the purchasing of a helmet really annoying. Much easier for Circle of Fortune players, which I wish I was. So badly wish I was a Circle of Fortune. Holy shit. Getting these blessings is a pain for Merchant Guild, on top of gold exploiting. So that's basically the blessings and how this build is played. Skill tree, real quick rundown. The initial start here, we made some changes in the initial start of this. We're going to go for damage because we wanted to have additive damage scaling to ramp our damage up from our more multipliers. We have the approach of Intelligence Necrotic Rest, and then we get these points for Necrotic Poison Rest again. And then we're going to run into the Warlock, which in this case, we're only taking the 5 points in here to help us with the mana regen and mana gain per curse, which is only going to be 1. And then Occultist Mind for intelligence scaling. You just want to have 5 points in here normally to get the mana per intelligence point. And then 5 points in here for armor, health, and also some extra more armor. We don't have that much armor, so this is a very helpful tool. You could move these 3 points into some necrotic damage if you want to from different sources on the tree. I went for this since I dropped a lot of intelligence to focus on damage. The Lich tree, we're going to go Intelligence Mana Regen, and obviously Dance with Death, as explained before. Max out the necrotic damage, and then we're going to jump all the way over to Crippling Insight for intelligence. We don't care about health regen. Ramp that intelligence up as best you can, and then we're going to get 4 points into crit. We don't care about cast speed. We don't care about attack speed. We want the crit. So 4 points in here. Max out the crit strike chance here. Max out the crit multi. Grab the flat damage as soon as you can before crit. This is way more important. And then we have 3 plays for necrotic penetration, which is also way more important than crits. That's an end game thing when you start maximizing your gear. After this, I chucked in 2 extra points in Ageless Aesthetic, which is the last thing for the movement speed. Probably should have respected this and taken these points at the very, very last levels, because leveling up between 95 to 100 actually took a lot of time, and smack the rest into this intelligence node. Again, you can drop some of these intelligence to go for more necrotic, but again, Stygian Beams goes faster. So I'm going to show you some gameplay footage to talk about the build. A little bit. This is a 308 corruption. I'm going to show you some general clearing here. So essentially, the sweet spot of farming right now is between 300 and 500 corruption. After 500, it's kind of useless to go higher, in my opinion. I know meta builds are handling around 1,000. When it comes to this build, I was hoping this would actually do very well in terms of clearing. After playing it more and more during the cycle start, this build performs very well. I've killed Aberoth 2 times, and the last time I did it, I never left my reperform. And that's about it. It's just been a very fun build to play and very lazy, which I will show you. First up, when I go into a map, I just like to build my HP up a little bit, get reperform, click Wandering Spirit, and after that, I'm using Death Seal for damage here and there. Then I'm just going to click Drain Life. So do this, Drain Life, and now I'm casting. Now I am literally just moving. And this is 300-something corruption. Make sure that you always cast it when you have full mana, so that you never lose your Wandering Spirits. And the clear speed is, as you can see, pretty comfortable. It's not the best. It's not a meta build in terms of performance when it comes to comparing it to like Dive Bomb Falconeer or the Torment Warlock, Vale Minion Eater Warlock. So there are better builds out there. When it comes to the Lich builds, there are very few high-performing builds out there. This is one of the higher-performing ones. I'm very happy to play this build in general. I'm going to show you this just how the clearing feels around 300 corruption. Here's the boss. I'll put a curse up. I'll put my Death Seal on. As you can see, the damage hits are right there. And all I'm doing is just sitting here and casting the ability, and then the guy's dead. Then we go out. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you the boss and how that looks, and why this is such a ridiculously fun build to play. So what we can do, which is a really cool system, is that we can utilize Glyph of Envy to get stability on the last map you ran. So you can just literally pick up any sort of modifiers and use the Envy. And now you can see my stability is almost capped out and can immediately jump into the boss, which is what I'm going to do. This is a 300 corruption boss, and there should be a Harbinger here as well. First, kill these guys off, and depending on your gear and how well you've designed it, make sure you don't lose your Wandering Spirits. Stand here, Death Seal, curse the boss, click every 6 seconds. That's it. Now I've overused my mana, as you can see, so this means I do less damage, which is not good. Just make sure that you fix that. As you can see, my leech, when I do take a damage, I will get brought out of my reperform if it kills me, which it did there. If it doesn't kill me, what then happens is that I will just leech that HP up immediately. So that's how the build works. Now that I'm out of form, I refuse to use the Death Seal to make sure that I don't risk dying, obviously, since you lower your EHP with that. And now that I'm back in form, I can then start doing my damage again. And this is, again, a 300 corruption Black Sun Riot build. And that's it. There are some abilities that you'd rather not tank. Most is fine. And then we're going to get a Harbinger. Harbingers have been very comfortable to play against, mostly since you never really need to aim where you're shooting. All you do is curse the guy and then click the button once every 6 seconds and you'll be fine. If I don't use Death Seals, I should just be straight up be able to tank this. You see my HP. I cannot tank this one. That's a huge damage. Some of these guys have a red one. Similar AoE scaling ability, but it's red. And that you should not tank either. That's basically the ability that you shouldn't tank. As long as you don't do that, you should be able to get brought out. Again, I have very, very bad gear in terms of my defensive scaling. So I should be able to tank much more if you actually get better gearing for it. So this I shouldn't be able to die to, but if I do, I'll have that second chance, if you will. That we don't want to tank. And if you want to move away and not tank these hits, all you have to do is just literally run around like this and cast every 6 seconds. Move around him, watch your mana, cast it, and just step away from the guy. Because it's very, very, very simple. And that's how this build is played. Very, very comfortable. Like, it's so lazy. So that is a 300 corruption boss. Now I'm going to show you a little higher corruption to give you a taste of how that will feel and where this build starts to fall off. So let's head out of here, and we're going to go to Reign of Dragons, which is the one I started pushing lately. This is a 563 corruption. I was doing fine on 500. My current gear could be improved. Like I mentioned, a lot of the focus is a lot on intelligence, which I felt was a bit unnecessary. I wish I had a higher focus on other modifiers. And because of this, my damage is a little low. And the problem with clearing is that you're not AoE hitting with a specific version. This means that you're going to be in a position where your damage output when you're clearing is going to be a bit rough. And I'm going to show you a clear just to show you what it means when you're lacking damage. You're going to get overrun and be forced to literally run around your targets, which is really frustrating to do because you need to be able to kill them fast. So if it's one target, you have really good damage. You can see here, this is fine. This is not a bad damage output for a 560 corruption. As soon as we encounter a bigger packs of enemies, see now my defensive layer is showing there. That actually bought me out of my form. Now I'm going to have to kite them around instead. And that itself didn't feel that great at this high corruption with my current theory. Now again, I play tested this in the closed test realm. We did 670 corruption. And that was very comfortable. But I think that the bosses at that point was a bit rough in general to deal with. So I think in general, when you get to this point, I could stop using my death seal, and I should realistically not have that big of a problem in terms of my survival. But here's the problem. Now there's so many targets to hit that I am no longer able to kill them fast enough, and I'm going to start getting overrun. Now I can still clear this, but the result of the playstyle without really good gear at this point means that I'm going to have to kite around them till they die. And this is where it really falls off compared to other meta builds that are, actual meta, not Lich meta. Lich is kind of on the back burner in terms of performance compared to other classes like Falconeer, Diabomb, Warlock, for example. But as you can see, my Lich form, I'm staying in it quite long. We're going to be able to get this one down. It's not a problem. And this is 560 corruption, I think I said. And I'm going to show you the boss in here as well to give you an idea of how that looks. Now, the higher corruption you get to, the harder these fights become. And obviously, it becomes a very frustrating if you are in a position where more and more of the abilities can actually start to bring you out of the Reaper form, even without the Death Seal, which is a big damage modifier. 563 corruption. I'm going to jump straight into it and give you an idea of how it looks. This is a dragon. I'm going to need to make sure that I stay away. I cannot tank the big AoE at this corruption. So I need to move out of this. Wait for the explosion. Oh, still too close. And now I don't want to use my Reaper form. The boss itself should not be a problem. It's the Harbinger at this difficulty that actually becomes a problem, in my opinion. But I'll show you. Apparently I could show you that much. Die to physical damage there. So this is a very clear display of how the defensive layer could be upped a bit. But stay away from him better and not to get hit by this. I'm going to do one more try. And I'll show you what I mean. The Harbinger itself has tons of damage abilities that does significant damage outputs, which is very, very frustrating. So what I tend to do is I try to stay away from using my Reaper or the Death Seal if I don't have to. And then I try to stay away from the boss targets so I don't tank them. Since I don't have to target anything, I just click one button every 6 seconds. Bosses like this is not really a problem to deal with. The hits he's doing actually deals tremendous amounts of damage. So try to stay away from that when it comes to a boss like this. Make sure the Wandering Spirit is active, recast your beams. And as you can see, it's not going to be a problem for me to eventually kill this guy. However, the Harbinger will be a bit of a tricky fight. I'm going to show you that fight specifically because it's not that hard to beat, but you will know what to do and how to beat it. Again, keep up the Wandering Spirits. If you fail it, you always have it off cooldown to recast it again. It's not a hard thing to do. And what I usually do is just take laps around the target, and if I feel comfortable, then I'll put up the Death Seal. However, if I lose my Reaper form, don't use Death Seal. Wait for the shit to get off cooldown, and just try to stay safe, and essentially just kite the targets, and it'll be more than fine. There we go, put my Death Seal up, and the boss will just eventually go down. Oh, he got too close to me, which means I lost my Reaper form. At this point, I need to stay away and be very careful. Impossible. With how I play it. And this is again waiting till I get my access to my Reaper form again, so I get that extra defensive layer. Once I have that defensive layer, I can die again without the actually dying, if you will. And my Wandering Spirit is still active, so we are fine. Good if you could stop moving though. Get out, back in, and now we have this. I will not be using Death Seal at all for this fight for obvious reasons. This guy will absolutely obliterate me. Make sure you don't overuse your mana because you'll lose tons of damage if you're casting without having full mana. It's a big, big factor for this build. Make sure he's cursed. And now all I will do is just stay away from him. That's it. Just learn the abilities. It's not that hard. he can still accidentally hit you, and that's where you have your backup of your Reaper form. And all I do now is just stay away. If you're not close to him, he very rarely does the big AoE hits that you have to dodge. And mostly he will just try to do this charge. He does an AoE slam that just like a Sunder or Cascade, a little rush ability. And sometimes this will happen. And this is when you get accidentally hit and die. Again, 560 corruption. I think that it's fine to play this build up to about 500 corruption. So if that's what you're looking for, this is more than fine. It's very lazy. It face tanks Aberoth, having no problems with it. It was very, very easy to do Aberoth. I saw a friend of mine do this build with a little bit better gear than me. The only ability from the Aberoth fight that brought about a Reaper form was the big hammer slam, but then he tanked every effect afterwards. So he literally just stood AFK killing the boss by clicking the drain life every 6 seconds. It's a cool build, not a meta clear speed, very enjoyable build to play. And I'm actually working on a Necromancer minion build together with Creparian next. So this is the build I've been playing. I've been having a lot of fun with it. I've only seen a sacrifice build with a potion used that I think that's been outperforming this one in terms of the performance compared to Stygian Cold builds for the Lich. So I'm very happy with what we achieved with this. Hope you like it as well. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Until next time, as always, stay safe.